Welcome back to another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. I'm here at the News Forum, where all voices matter. I'd like to welcome back Thomas Caldwell. He is the founder of Caldwell Securities in Toronto. And we're going to discuss the state of the markets and the economy in these disruptive times. Tom, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tony. Good to be here.
Maybe we can start with the general trends in the capital markets these days. What are you seeing?
Well, it's interesting. One can get confused and cluttered with all the bad news, mixed news, potentially bad news. There is no news. All there is out there is opinions. But I always say that the market will actually tell you what it wants to do. For example, a bull market always ignores bad news. A bear market always ignores good news. We've had lots of bad news, yet the market is still powering on the upside, fueled by lots of cash in the system and still low interest rates. So by my definition, we are still in a bull market. Now, we've had some pretty significant down days, but if you look at it, those days correct literally within 2 days after that. So there's this residual or underpinning that keeps coming into the market. So I'm still an optimist, Tony.
And you've been very consistent on that, Tom. I'm going to give you the credit you deserve. You've not shifted your opinion on that. So it seems like it is trending positive. You mentioned a couple of the reasons or the causes of that. Do you want to expand a little bit on what is driving the market these days?
Well, I guess the fundamental factors still remain tons of cash within the system. Pardon me, very low interest rates, and even the threat of inflation. There's really only one way you can protect yourself against inflation, and that's by owning stuff. So inflation means things go up in price or the value of your money depreciates. And the beauty with equities is you're owning real assets that generate income, that in many cases benefit from a degree of inflation. So the market is seeing these fundamentals, operating in these fundamentals, and it's just sweeping away all the potential negatives. So I think those are the real underpinnings.
Now, in terms of the cash that's available, that's sloshing around, is that due to government programs, or is that due to the lingering effects of the pandemic? What do you attribute it to?
I think many things. There's demographics. We have people that are getting older. That creates cash in the system. Older folks, have all this stuff. They're not spending as much money. So that builds assets and investment funds, liquidity. The government programs, and particularly the driving of low interest rates down, is another factor. I mean, you can, 2%, 3%, 4% mortgages are very attractive. It doesn't make sense even to pay cash. It's far better to take a mortgage. So the money is available, whether it be through borrowings, whether through government plans, and the COVID emergency help programs are now being quite negative because we all know a business now that can't hire people, and there's a value shift going on out there with folks saying, "Hey, do I really want to work? Do I really want to go downtown? Do I really want to wrestle with Toronto traffic or whatever?" So there's lots of reasons behind it. Government grants, low interest rates, availability of credit, demographics, all of those are contributing to the fact that we are in fields and fields of money.
Mm. Obviously, one of the more worrying trends, though, is inflation. Let me ask you the question. Is this a worrying trend or is it not a worrying trend?
I think the inflation has already happened. There are different kinds of inflation. People use a phrase and they think that means everything. Inflation can be cost of living inflation, or it can be asset value inflation. The asset value inflation has already happened.
Right.
The cheap money and the money around has driven up housing prices, condo prices, exotic car prices, art, wine collections. It's driven up the value of assets massively. Now, that doesn't show in government statistics. They still say, well, we're at 2% or 3%.
Right.
I personally don't know anything that's only gone up 2 or 3%. Try gasoline.
No, that's a good point. The consumer price index is not the whole story, is it?
No, it's not.
No. We're going to continue with our discussion with Thomas Caldwell. He is the founder of Caldwell Securities in Toronto, discussing the state of the markets, and we'll pivot after the break to talk a little bit about the economy. Lots going on there, particularly post-election, some trends that we might want to talk about, as well as the more macro trends. So stay with us. We'll be right back with our guest after these messages. Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum here with Thomas Caldwell. He's the founder of Caldwell Securities. Tom, let me pivot from inflation, because you're quite right. Obviously, there's asset inflation and there's other types of inflation. So let me just pivot that to affordability obviously that was a key issue in the election campaign. Are we any further ahead in tackling the affordability issues that you were referencing?
Affordability of what, houses or?
Houses or groceries or, to buy a decent steak in a grocery store now, it's pretty well what I paid on my down payment on my car a few years ago. So these kinds of things.
Well, I guess in a short way, the answer is no. Now, affordability of, say, houses, over time, that will correct. Just demographically, there's older guys like me, we're going to end up selling our houses to pay for Half Your Trails home where we want to live out the balance of our pathetic lives, that sort of thing. So that's going to be one thing. The houses will do self-correct over time. But remember, we're an immigrant country and Toronto is an immigrant city. So people are pouring here because you can come from wherever and find a community of your country here in this country. So there's a lot of pressures on the Toronto housing market. A lot of the affordability, take a look at gasoline prices. Government policies have been very, very anti-energy for a significant period of time. And now the banks with climate change, we can't lend money to the oil and gas industry. And guess what, kids? If you cut the supply, the price goes up.
Right.
And frankly, I've done very well on that because I bought all the energy stocks because we're not ready to have windmills in every car and solar panels or whatever. That's going to take, it won't be in my time at any rate, let's put it that way. So we're going to be dependent, but we've driven up prices. You drive up energy, that percolates through everything.
So energy stocks.
That's policy. That's policy.
Yeah, no, that's right. So energy stocks are really showing you that there is going to be a short-term supply issue here.
Well, if you're not looking for new oil and it's very costly or gas, then what you want to do is instead of go looking for it, you'll just buy a company that's in the business that has reserves. So it's cheaper to take over other companies than it is to go and look for new energy resources. But a lot of our policies, and again, flooding the system with cash, is creating energy and inflation in some areas. So I think the markets tend to correct themselves where we have challenges sometimes when the government say we have to do something. The best thing they can do is just stay home and watch TV and let markets solve themselves, and they will. The more interference you get, the more it becomes problematic than anything else. Remember they decided they would restrict mortgages to somehow bring housing prices down. Right. Remember that? Who can think of that? That's incredible. Chronically stupid.
Let me just swing back to energy for a second because it reminds me of what's happening in the UK right now with the energy shortage at petrol stations and heating and so on. And I just read recently that the UK government hadn't approved a new North Sea oil concession for about a decade. So again, this goes to your point that sometimes it's maybe well-meaning, but these energy policies are having an impact on people.
I think one of the challenges the governments have is they tend to address vocal special interest groups, whether they be regional interests or real or contrived victim interests, or just people that are vocal or whatever the mood is at the time. So we are so propagandized in different directions. Governments respond to that without looking at the basic needs. So, okay, let's cut investment in hydrocarbons, but we're not ready for the rest of the stuff. It's interesting today in the markets, I noticed uranium stocks are doing well. Okay, that's a great idea. But if you're going to generate more electricity, there's only two ways you can do it. Gas-fired, or there's three ways: gas-fired, natural gas, nuclear, or coal. Now, the Chinese don't seem to be too worried about pollution, so they're back in the coal business. And nuclear You and I can decide, let's build a nuclear reactor today. It will be 20 years
Right.
before it's on stream. That's if we're really lucky and there aren't too many objections. So government spending time addressing short-term special interest needs, basically to buy votes, are creating fundamental problems. And they're bigger, they get bigger as time goes on. And we have fundamental issues that I don't think we have really considered at this point.
Yeah, no, very good points. And I'd like to remind our viewers that 70% of China's energy needs are still coal-fired plants. So they talk a good game at UN conferences, but they're still using coal a whole lot. We're going to be back with our guest, Thomas Caldwell, after the break. Stay with us. We've got lots to talk about. And we're back here at Boom or Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Thomas Caldwell. He's the founder of Caldwell Securities. Tom, again, looking at various pressures, we've talked about inflation, we've talked about affordability. What do you see happening with wages? Are they gonna rise to meet some of the demands in our economy, or what's happening there?
The workplace is really a very interesting and difficult place to try to analyze. I think we have to go back to people. What are people going to do? What do they want to do? There have been a lot of changes in attitudes, behaviors, thinking about work. Do I want to work at home? Do I want to work part-time? There's all kinds of things going on, and not everybody's going to want to come back.
Right.
And indeed, some companies don't want everybody back. So we are in the middle of this attitudinal change with regard to corporate life. A lot of people now see themselves as freelancers having to work for this company for this one period of time. So there has been a change in the definition and attitude of work or to work. So that's going to be part of it. Clearly, some restaurants, for example, are going to have to pay more to get staff because a lot of them are just short-staffed.
Right.
And if we go, by the way, to a guaranteed income stream, which sounds good, but if you subsidize not working, you're going to get more of that. So it's a very complex topic, and I think we have to sort of feel our way to see what happens as we get rid of, and we will be getting rid of COVID. It's become an institution now. Hundreds of thousands of new employees working for government. Right. They're not going to lay them off. So what's going to happen is we're into more and more control of that. So I don't even know how we come off the COVID thing to really see what the real market for labor is, the real numbers who want to come back to work, who are in fact even needed anymore. But remember, people should remember, if you work in a sort of a routine job, now if you're building a company, you got to be there with people and part of a team. But if you're working in a routine job, you might be able to do that at home. So frankly, those are done by a lot of major, say, financial institutions, banks. So if you got a gazillion people working from Collingwood, for example, guess what? You can have a gazillion people working from Bangladesh just as easily. Mm-hmm. And so there's another dynamic that's going on. So there's so many moving parts in the labor theater, if you will, that I don't even have the answer to it yet. But it starts with the people. What do people want to do? And how quickly are we going to get back to whatever a new normal is? And the new normal is going to have a lot of government involved in it. I mean, governments, as you know, don't give up control. Once they got control for whatever reason, they'll keep it for whatever other reasons come to mind.
Yeah, that old adage about the income tax being a temporary measure in 1917, and here
I remember that.
Oh, no, you don't. No, you don't. I'm gonna stick up for you right now. I think you've made a good point about all these competing pressures for workers and about wages, and we really don't know what the long-term trends are going to be. It might be a bunch of different trends. I think that's what you're saying, Tom, that there's no one trend. It's just a bunch of different trends, right?
We'll just see how they converge and what the macro looks like after that. But as I say, you got to go back to the people themselves. What do they want to do? And what's the perception?
Yeah, no, I again, good point there. Do you think that in a sense, we've had, remember when Doug Ford got elected, he cut the experimental program on guaranteed income and everybody was all upset. Haven't we really had a massive public experiment on guaranteed income now? Isn't that what COVID has done?
Absolutely. But I think it was Mark Twain said, any government that robs Peter to pay Paul can always count on the support of Paul. Yeah. And I think that's where we are. I mean, the more you subsidize a thing, the more you get of it. And if you're subsidizing not working or unemployment, you're going to get more of it. It's just that simple. I mean, I know for me, I had to work hard as a young guy because I didn't have a rich uncle or anybody taking, I had to get to work and do something. And I think that's a message that's sometimes lost in some sectors and some demographics.
And now we've got businesses pressuring the federal government to continue the wage subsidy programs.
I think that's wrong too. I think, when corporations get into bed with governments, it never works out well. Maybe more so in Quebec, but not here, not in the rest of the country.
Well, they seem to be the experts at that. I do want to we've got only about 30 seconds before the next break, so we might have to break this in two, but I want you to start commenting a little bit on supply shortages and the supply chain disruptions, because we've seen a lot of that in the last, it's happened all throughout the pandemic, but I guess everybody blithely assumed that it would be over. But of course, increased demand as well as COVID restrictions, amongst other things, have meant that we've had this global supply chain crisis. So we're going to take a break, but I want to hear Tom's comments on that. Stay with us. And we're back once again. Here I am, your host, Tony Clement, for Boom and Bust. And we are, of course, with Thomas Caldwell. He is the founder of Caldwell Securities. Tom, I kind of set it up before the break there about supply shortages, this supply chain sort of crisis that is now in front of the media. And certainly we've seen examples of that. What do you make of all this?
Well, first off, let me point out that our associate, Liz Demosky, still doesn't have her barbecue after paying for it in July. So it comes down to very important issues. But the supply chain problem can be good for the economy. See, the problem with pessimists is they stop halfway through the issue instead of going to the outcome. Mm-hmm. So we have this issue now, supply chains, tough getting stuff. But as we speak, there are discussions going on in almost every major corporation in America, and who knows, maybe even one or two in Canada, saying we have to shorten our supply chain. We need to build facilities in America, whether it be for microchips, whether it be for Furbies or whatever we import from Asia. You're going to see more building. So I believe the supply chain issue will lead to greater capital investment in America, possibly in Canada. I don't think governments have really seen that yet to encourage capital development or capital investment. I mean, President Biden's infrastructure program, I don't think it's needed, because I think American enterprise is going to be trying to shorten that supply chain. That means everything from construction to robotics to artificial intelligence to build more, because if you're building a plant in America, you can't have the high wages, you got to have robotics, artificial intelligence. I think this could be the start of a major capital spending boom in North America. And I know many companies are considering that. So that's what I see. Eventually, it can turn out to be a positive. It's a mess right now, but I think it can turn out to our benefit overall.
Is this kind of a new phase of globalization then, Tom? I mean, there's been a good run of globalizing forces for decades, including the accession of China into the World Trade Organization. Is this something different then?
I think it's a partial reversal of that globalization trend. These supply chains, these container ships can't get unloaded. It's incredible the jam ups you're having, and you're not getting needed parts. I go by a GM dealer down in Niagara-on-the-Lake. There's nothing on the lot. There are no truck cars. There's very few, just 5 or 6 or something. So clearly, corporations are going to say, we have to get dependable supply of parts or whatever we need, and that means we got to build them down the road or a truck distance from our plant. So I think that's what it's going to be, but it's a reversal. How big, how bad, how long, I don't know. But I think the globalization will ease off and we'll start to build more back here. But it would be good to have government policy recognizing that trend and getting on. I mean, we haven't heard any of that, for example, in our election here. How are we going to build the Canadian economy? And those are the issues we should be dealing with as opposed to vote buying.
It's starting to be talked about in the Ontario government. They've created Supply Ontario, which is looking at different supply chains. Again, because this has not only become a manufacturing or jobs crisis, it's become a national security crisis and a health security crisis at the same time with the pandemic, right?
Well, it always has been. We are dependent on ridiculous things over the years. Many years ago, Canada could not go to war because we didn't have those big Globemasters. So we had to have Russian Anatov freighters to carry tanks or armored personnel carriers anywhere in the world. But they were all tied up delivering Furbies for Walmart. So it was totally something out of a spoof of some kind. So clearly we have to sort of rationalize the combination of costs, accessibility, and supply delays. Those have to be addressed. And they are being addressed right now. I know there's a lot of discussions going on about that.
Right.
So I think we'll get there. We'll get the stuff done, but the government's got to get on board. Supply Ontario. I've never benefited from a government program in the 55 years I've been in business, and I don't look there. My expectations are minimal.
As they are at Boom and Bust as well. We are not certainly. We have not had the largesse either. But Tom Caldwell, it's a great pleasure to have you on the show again. Let's talk soon.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. Lots of good insights there from Thomas Caldwell, as usual, talking about supply chains and housing prices and inflation and all of these trends that seem to be happening all at once. It certainly is not a dull moment when it comes to the capital markets or for the economy for that matter. Keep tuned here at Boom and Bust as we discuss these issues in the future. Thanks for watching today.